Chapter 3465. A Good Romance. BQG 6. There was a monkey following him. Although he had been dead for many years, his strength was still above the immortal path. He could be said to be a strong bodyguard. Linghan thought about it and decided to continue forward. He walked in front while the monkey followed. The darkness was boundless and seemed to have no end. After walking for a long time, Linghan felt his vision blur and a person blocked his way. To be exact, it was a corpse. Monkey. Hey, weren't you in a trance and only knew to follow me? Why did you suddenly block my way? Linghan wanted to circle around, but the monkey man continued to move, always blocking his path. What was the meaning of this? Obviously, an immortal expert, even if he was already dead, was not someone Linghan could fight against. The monkey blocked his way and Linghan couldn't go past. Could it be that the path ahead was very dangerous? This monkey didn't have any enmity towards him. Now that he suddenly blocked his way, maybe there was great danger ahead. That was why he stopped him. All right, Linghan nodded and walked back. As expected, the monkey man didn't stop him again, and just like before, followed behind him unsteadily, as if he was a walking corpse. He was a walking corpse. Linghan felt that his heart was very big. He was followed by a dead monkey, but he still had the mood to care about such details. They walked, and very soon, they returned to the public square. Daddy. The 7 milk babies pointed at him. I know. Linghan nodded. A person with a big hole in his chest was following behind him. Anyone who saw that would be scared. Don't be nervous, this brother saved me. He explained. The 7 Calabash brothers all nodded and immediately looked at the dead monkey in a different light. Second baby stared at the monkey for a while and said, "This guy once stood on the 3rd step of the immortal path. TSK. He even cultivated a silver core. Unfortunately, he exploded. How strange, he has been dead for so many years, why can he still move? Could it be that his lingering spirit is so strong? The 3rd step of the immortal path. No wonder he still had the battle power of the immortal path even after death." Linghan scratched his head. Could it be that he had to bring this monkeyman corpse out with his heart pierced through? But with a corpse at the immortal path level following him, Linghan couldn't possibly chase it away. If you want to follow, then follow. Who asked you to be so awesome? Linghan and the 7 milk babies walked in front, while the monkey man followed them unsteadily. When they arrived at the stone statue area in the center of the square, they saw that the front suddenly lit up. The huge stone statue seemed to come alive, emitting a golden glow. The light dispelled the darkness and made the huge stone statue stand out completely. It was roughly 1,500 jong tall. This was the image of a middle-aged man with an awe-inspiring divine might. This was especially the case for his eyes. Even though they were carved out of stone, they were bright and full of expression. There was an indescribable divine might to them. There is a boundary between life and death that cannot be crossed. A resounding voice rang out, causing Linghan's ears to feel like they were about to explode. The stone statue emitted a golden glow, instantly illuminating the entire square. The monkeyman immediately revealed a fearful expression and continuously retreated until he exited the square and entered the still dark area. When the monkeyman completely exited the square, the light emitted by the stone statue also dimmed, returning to its original appearance. Could it be that this stone statue specialized in suppressing evil? This place was very strange. There were corpses everywhere, but the dead could still stand up. However, there was a stone statue suppressing them, preventing them from entering the realm of the living. Linghan couldn't help but be filled with curiosity. Was there really a place like the netherworld after death? Otherwise, what kind of place was this, and what was the significance of this stone statue? Thinking about this, Linghan turned and left. If he had the chance, he wanted to return to Ocean Sea Mountain and ask Monkey Bro about it. He hadn't seen him in a long time, and he didn't know if Monkey Bro had escaped yet. Linghan returned to the end of the secret passage and left. After covering up his tracks, he continued to walk along the tunnel at the bottom of the lake. After carefully walking for a long time, he finally reached the end of the tunnel. The 8 of them walked out and saw a huge stone wall in front of them. There was a huge picture carved on it. However, there were at least 100 corpses lying below the stone wall. Some had been decapitated, while others had been chopped in half. It could be seen that the culprit was extremely cruel. Ling Han's gaze swept across the area. There were 3 living people here, 2 men and 1 woman. They all had their backs to him and were looking up at the stone wall, as if they were comprehending some kind of peerless martial art. Hearing the commotion of Ling Han's group, the white-robed man among the 3 stood up and turned around. He looked familiar. Ling Han was startled at first, but then he immediately recalled that this was the person he had seen when he had jumped into the ice cave in the lake. Because this person had just walked out of the tree hole, he had only glanced at him briefly. More people have come to die. Tong Miao revealed a bloodthirsty smile and walked towards Ling Han. Ling Han frowned and said, "You killed all the people here?" "That's right, and you're about to become their companion," Tong Miao said. Whenever he saw blood, his killing intent would surge endlessly. If it weren't for the fact that Dong Qi and Xin Rui's strength wasn't any weaker than him, they wouldn't have been able to sit here so peacefully. Ling Han focused his gaze and saw that Tong Miao had 6 inscription patterns in his body. There were also dozens of light dots around him. This was clearly an awakening realm cultivator who had broken through with 6 bones. If he could reach 6 bones in the extremity realm, then he must have also reached 6 changes in the blood transformation realm. The higher the realm, the harder it was to break through. But Ling Han wasn't afraid. Even if the trial didn't suppress Tong Miao's cultivation, he would still be absolutely fair. Ling Han smiled slightly. "I don't believe you. So what if you don't believe me? I don't care." Tong Miao charged over and slashed with his sword. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. Ling Han once again saw the screen in his consciousness, asking him if he wanted to lower his opponent's cultivation. "Lower it to 6 bones," said Ling Han through his consciousness. Tong Miao's cultivation immediately dropped. Tong Miao was surprised. He stopped in his tracks and said, "So you're only at the extreme bone stage. Haha, you're just at the extreme bone stage and you still dare to dream of becoming a dragon whelp. Let me cut you in half with my sword and end your fantasies." He attacked again. Even if his cultivation was suppressed to 6 bones, he still thought he could easily kill Ling Han. Ling Han clenched his fist, wrapped it with high-level energy, and punched out. Bang! The fist smashed into the sword, and an intense light flashed. But neither the sword nor the fist was able to suppress the other. They were in a deadlock. Ling Han nodded. This Tong Miao was similar to Hong Tianbu. They had both cultivated each realm to the extreme. But when he had fought against Hong Tianbu in his one vein state, he had used all his methods and only ended up with both sides suffering. That was why he had decided to suppress Tong Miao's cultivation to 6 bones. It was the right choice to be safe. Reading on the phone was more refreshing. Chapter 3466. A Good Romance. BQG 6. CC, you really do have some strength. Tong Miao was surprised. He believed that Ling Han's cultivation base was at the 6 bone realm, which was why he had pulled his cultivation base down to the 6 bone realm so that they could have a fair battle. He was confident that he was invincible among those of the same cultivation level, but now that he was unable to gain the upper hand in a single strike, he was somewhat shocked. Other than Dong Qi and Xin Ruyue, there was actually another genius who was not weaker than him. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Ling Han of Shenbei country," Ling Han said lightly. Tong Miao was even more surprised. In this world of martial art, which could only be said to be primitive, there was actually such a genius. The 2 prides of the imperial capital, Hong Tianbu and Ling Han. "So you're Ling Han." Xin Ruyue had long since stood up to watch the battle. When she heard Hong Tianbu's words, she couldn't help but let out an "oh," revealing an expression of understanding. Tong Miao was at a loss. What Hong Tian steps, Ling Han? What the hell were all these? Forget it, there's no need to care about it. In any case, they'll just die under my sword. Die. He waved his sword and slashed down. Even though their strength was equal, it did not mean that their battle prowess was equal as well. This was a completely different concept. Martial skills, experience, and adaptability on the spot would determine the balance of victory and defeat. A sword slashed down, and with a kai sound, raging flames burned on the blade of the sword as it slashed down towards Ling Han. The sword had yet to arrive, but an incomparably scorching heatwave had already assaulted him, causing Ling Han to feel as if the hair on his skin was about to be scorched. Scorch marks appeared on the corners of his clothes, with light smoke rising from them. Did he want her to run away naked? Ling Han was enraged. Peng, he activated his stone energy, forming a barrier in front of him. Then, with a light whistle, he charged toward Tong Miao. Bang bang bang, iron fists bombarded the long sword unceasingly, only to see tongues of flame spitting out randomly, high-level energy colliding, flashing dazzling sparks. Xin Ruyue and Dong Qi were watching the battle. They exchanged glances at the same time and revealed a trace of fear. This uncivilized person was really strong. Under normal circumstances, they would be able to easily kill Ling Han with their extremely high cultivation levels. But in this training ground, the battles would be relatively fair, and a higher realm would not have much of an advantage. Only one person could walk out from each peak. In other words, they were all competitors, and there was no room for compromise. Only one person could stand out. Therefore, the fact that Ling Han was so powerful also alerted them. It turned out that there was a third strong competitor. They watched the battle seriously, trying to capture the flaws of Ling Han and Tong Miao. Everyone had their flaws. Some of them had imperfect techniques, and some of them made mistakes during cultivation. It was the same for Ling Han and Tong Miao. They were both looking for the opponent's weak points to deal a fatal blow. However, their strengths were extremely close, and their flaws were pitifully few. Even if they were exposed, they would disappear in a flash. It was extremely difficult to capture and react in such a fast-paced battle. Only by fighting for a long time and familiarizing themselves with each other's moves, would they be able to take advantage of each other's flaws and decide the victor in an instant. Ha ha ha, how delightful, how delightful. Tong Miao laughed. Although your realm isn't high, your combat strength isn't weak at all. You are qualified to be the one I kill and remember. Was this considered glory? Ling Han chuckled. You're bragging to the heavens. You'll know very soon whether I'm bragging or not. Tong Miao did not get angry. He only revealed a cold smile and stretched his left hand to his right. Somehow, he was holding a sharp sword in each hand. They could be separated. Only with two swords can I unleash my combat strength. Tong Miao stuck out his tongue and licked the sword. His face was full of bloodthirsty madness. Pervert. Crazy. Too ugly. The milk babies said, but their eyes were bright. Ling Han shook his head. Looks like I have to teach you a lesson. Otherwise, what if I let you lead the children astray? Talkative Tong Miao charged over, his two swords dancing together. A strange scene appeared. The sword in his right hand was still wrapped in flames, but the sword in his left hand was covered in frost. They were clearly two diametrically opposed energies, but he had perfectly fused them together, and they did not clash with each other. One cold and one hot, the power was very shocking. Ling Han only felt that half of his body was boiling hot, while the other half was cold. This greatly affected his blood flow, causing the circulation of his secret power to become a little sluggish. It was an ultimate move. Ling Han snorted and circulated the demon monkey fist. Immediately, a ruthless aura circulated in Ling Han's body, causing him to feel as though he had transformed into an ancient demon monkey. He was lawless and could shatter the heavens and cut the earth. Immediately, the effect of the cold and hot attacks on him was greatly reduced. Ling Han moved forward and launched a counterattack against Tong Miao. Tong Miao could not help but be surprised. When he used both swords, it had always been successful. Even when he was fighting against Dong Qi and Xin Ruyue, the two of them were also greatly affected. It was just that they also had powerful ultimate moves that affected him as well. Otherwise, he would have already chopped off their heads. But being surprised was just being surprised. He naturally would not lose his composure. Both swords danced and slashed towards Ling Han. This time, Ling Han did not summon the phantom image of the ancient demonic monkey. Instead, he fused it with his own body, and used it to resist the cold and hot air. This was something he had only realized after watching the battle between the monkey man and the large spider. Perhaps he had only excavated 1% of this fist art's power. Dong-chi and Shin-Ryue were both shocked. Although they had dissolved Tong Miao's dual swords, their bodies had still been affected. Unlike Ling Han, he seemed to be completely fine. How could this outsider be so monstrous? In comparison, it seemed as though he should be the one who had inherited the true essence of martial art, while they were the barbarians. Ha, interesting. Tong Miao became even crazier. His blood qi suddenly surged, and his battle prowess immediately skyrocketed. After a few slashes, Ling Han was unable to match up to him. He was struck several times, causing blood to flow out. Ling Han let out a long howl and his blood qi also surged. He did not believe it. The two of them fought fiercely, and this time, Ling Han had a slight advantage. This caused Tong Miao, Dong-chi, and Shin-Ryue's expressions to change. How could they not know that this meant that after Ling Han's blood qi surged, his battle prowess had increased even more than theirs? In reality, this increase was one of the standards to measure a cultivator's potential. It was mainly based on how perfect one's cultivation in the opening pulse realm was. Ling Han's advantage meant that he had cultivated the opening pulse realm to an even more perfect level. Hiss, this monster. Tong Miao was speechless. He was an existence in a prison. Although it was a cage, there were countless experts inside. The sect leader of the Hengtian sect even stood on the second step of the celestial path. Under his tutelage, his foundation was actually not as perfect as that of an outsider. He gritted his teeth and transferred the sword in his left hand to his right hand, combining them into one again. His freed left hand took out a small stone. He forcefully squeezed, and the stone shattered. Moreover, it shattered very thoroughly, turning into dust. Tong Miao took a deep breath, and all the dust entered his mouth. Instantly, his eyes became crimson, and his aura also rose madly, far exceeding the increase that should have been caused by the surging of his blood qi. It was more refreshing to read on the phone. Chapter 3467. A Good Romance. BQG 6. CCF*CK, he used forbidden drugs just because he couldn't win. Too shameless. This Tong Miao is really going all out. He even used the ashes, Shin-Ryue said with a frown. If it were Shin-Ryue, she probably wouldn't want to lose to a native either. Dong-chi laughed. Shin-Ryue didn't say anything. After a while, she slowly nodded. Although they were prisoners, the level of martial art was far above this world. If they, the geniuses, couldn't even lose to a native, they would be laughed at. Therefore, they could lose to geniuses who also came out of the prison, but they couldn't lose to a weak native outside. After Tong Miao absorbed the strange ashes, he seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and his strength seemed to have doubled. Boom, he threw a punch, and it was extremely fast. Ling Han launched a series of attacks to meet his opponent's attack head-on. He couldn't help but retreat, feeling as if his bones were about to break. He didn't have time to be shocked, and hurriedly dodged to the side, because Tong Miao had already slashed at him. Father, that's the ashes left behind by the strong. If you absorb it into your body, you can temporarily increase your strength, second baby said. Shameless, do you dare to have a fair fight? Eldest baby said disdainfully. Tong Miao acted as if he didn't hear him. He only had one thought, and that was to kill Ling Han. Absorb the ashes of the strong? Ling Han couldn't help but shiver. Damn, this was too disgusting. Get lost, you damn pervert. He roared, and his murderous aura rushed out first. Tong Miao couldn't help but stiffen, but it was only for a moment. He returned to normal and attacked Ling Han again. It seemed that with the support of the ashes, his secret power, spirit, and physical strength had all been improved. This was the first time that Ling Han's murderous aura attack had such little effect. However, no matter how weak it was still effective. Tong Miao's movements stiffened, and his attack naturally became sluggish. This could also be considered an opening. Ling Han's figure moved nimbly, and he passed through his opponent's opening, then launched a counterattack. Tong Miao was like a madman. He once again split his sword into two hands and slashed repeatedly. Blood-red aura circulated around his body, and even his black hair was dyed red. Night Demon 18 slashes. He roared in a low voice, and his two swords swiftly slashed out, slashing out two incredibly thick and long flashes of sword chi. They actually transformed into two gigantic bats that flew towards Ling Han. Ling Han snorted and punched out with a demon monkey fist. A demon monkey also appeared, and it was filled with a ruthless aura as it punched towards the two bats. The demonic monkey displayed its might and tore the two big bats apart. However, its own power was also exhausted, and it turned into a shadow and disappeared. Xin Ruyue and Dong Qi were dazzled by this scene. How is this possible? To think that a native like him could grasp such a terrifying ultimate art. Why does that demonic monkey give me the feeling of a saint? It makes me tremble. I don't even have the courage to look straight at it. Could it be that this is a peerless divine art left behind by the demon saint? After the two of them recovered from their shock, they revealed covetous looks. Saints were high and mighty, looking down on the world. Even a casual instruction from them could cause one's battle prowess to be reborn. And if this was a saint's art, even if it was passed down from the demon saint, it would still be an indescribable treasure that could make the powerhouses in the prison go crazy for it. More importantly, Ling Han was only a native without any powerful background. Even if they killed him and took his art, so what? Did they need to be afraid that someone would come and cause trouble for them? Tong Miao was also affected by the demonic monkey, but Ling Han's cultivation level was too low. This kind of influence was like the impact of the baleful aura. It was there, but the effect was actually not that great. Thus, Tong Miao's attack paused for a moment and then poured forth again, but its power was slightly weakened. Ling Han swung his fist to meet the attack while preparing a counterattack. The heavenly rune jade was already in his hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Xiao, he threw out the treasure in his hand and pushed it with his psychic power. In an instant, it reached more than 9 times the speed of sound and recovered to the terrifying weight of 5,000 kilograms. Even an enlightening realm cultivator would be smashed into pieces if he were to face this attack head-on. Tong Miao's reaction was extremely fast, and he immediately blocked with his two swords in front of him. Peng, the heavenly rune jade smashed onto the swords. These two treasured swords made of unknown materials, but they were definitely extraordinary, instantly shattered. Tong Miao's perlicue was even split open. The heavenly rune jade's momentum did not dissipate, and it struck Tong Miao again, causing his body to tremble and bounce back. However, after being blocked by the swords, the power of the heavenly rune jade was also greatly reduced. This attack did not kill Tong Miao, but only caused a light injury. Ling Han's figure leaped out, and he reached out to grab the heavenly rune jade. This thing weighed more than 5,000 kilograms, and his psychic power could not grab it back. Sure, Tong Miao immediately threw out a punch. He was only slightly injured, and he had not lost his ability to fight. Ling Han's figure leaped back, and he dodged this punch. Then, he raised the heavenly rune jade. Seeing this, Tong Miao could not help but be terrified. He had just tasted the power of the heavenly rune jade, how would he dare to take another blow? Previously, the swords had blocked the attack for him, but now, there was no more. He was very decisive, and he immediately turned around and ran. Xiao, his figure spread out. He did not dare to walk in a straight line, and his body moved extremely fast, so that Ling Han did not have the chance to lock onto him. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace. In reality, as long as he ran out of a certain area, the suppression on his cultivation would disappear. The cultivation of the awakening realm, the strength close to the mystery-seeking realm, was not something that Ling Han could match. Ling Han did not chase after him. Looking at the sudden increase in his opponent's speed, he knew that Tong Miao's cultivation had already recovered. This meant that their first battle had already ended. If he took the initiative to challenge Tong Miao, what would he do if the formation here no longer suppressed his cultivation? Absolute fairness was his trump card, and naturally, he would not use it so easily. Dong Qi and Xin Ruyue looked at each other, and they could not help but frown. The attack that Ling Han used at the end sent chills down their spines. Under such a close distance, how could he dodge an attack that came at 9 times the speed of sound? One had to know that if they fought with Ling Han, their cultivation would be suppressed to the extreme bone realm. Actually, it was not impossible for them to win. As long as the two of them could cooperate sincerely, one would attract the firepower, and the other would take the opportunity to attack. After all, Ling Han only had one heavenly rune jade. The problem was, who would attract the firepower? This was not a joke, and they could easily lose their lives. Putting aside the fact that they were strangers who met by chance, even if they were fellow apprentices, they would have to consider whether they would be betrayed by the other party. Don't forget, this also involved competing for the position of the fledgling dragon. Therefore, it was completely impossible for them to cooperate. The two of them smiled at Ling Han, appearing very friendly. They were very familiar with the rules of the formation here. If a low-level martial artist took the initiative to attack a high-level martial artist, then the formation would not operate and forcibly suppress the high-level martial artist. Therefore, if Ling Han took the initiative, they would be able to kill Ling Han with their high-level martial artists. Deep in their hearts, they naturally hoped that Ling Han would force himself to fight. Reading on mobile phones is more refreshing. Chapter 3469. A Good Romance. BQG 6. See what kind of treasure could compare to this supplementary cultivation method. Moreover, Shinryue had revealed that if the secret of this cultivation method was leaked, experts would take action. Whether it was him, the teacher, or Dongqi, the subject, they would both be killed. Ling Han didn't care if Dongqi died or not, but he naturally wouldn't do it if he had to pay with his life. Not interested. Ling Han shook his head. Dongqi's gaze sharpened. Native, don't be too arrogant and forget your identity. Oh, what identity? Ling Han asked. You're just a bumpkin in this primitive and backward land. You've just come into contact with martial arts, so you have no idea how big the world is, Dongqi said coldly. How would you know that there's a huge prison beneath the world, you know? There are so many experts in there, and their realms are so high that you can't even imagine it. Prison. Ling Han was astonished. According to what he said, whether it was the earliest demon rat, or Kui Zhanhai, or the experts of the immortal path, they all came from this prison. Under this world, there was a prison, but the upheaval of heaven and earth allowed them to escape. Wait, could it be that the upheaval was because they were about to escape? Ling Han's mind raced, but his expression didn't change. He only said indifferently, "You're just a prisoner, why are you so arrogant? Are you insulting those seniors and lords?" Dongqi sneered, "Do you think that just because there's a saint emperor in Xianbei country, you can protect you? You're wrong. Chen Fengyang has only just entered the immortal path. As long as the crack in the prison opens a little more, even stronger experts will appear and easily kill Chen Fengyang. That's why you, a native, should know your own limits." Ling Han shook his head. "You're a native and a bumpkin, it makes me very angry." Dongqi laughed heartily. "So what? Do you still want to attack me?" He was more than happy to see Ling Han like this. If the weak took the initiative to provoke the strong, the formation would not reduce the cultivation level of the strong. In that case, killing Ling Han would be as easy as raising his hand. Of course, he would first extract Ling Han's secrets. Ling Han's gaze was cold as he said, "I dare you to say another native." "Natives, natives, natives." Dongqi laughed and said provocatively, "I told you, I have to say natives a few more times." Ling Han shook his head. "Why are there always people courting death?" He took out the heavenly rune jade, wanting to end the battle as quickly as possible. Dongqi narrowed his eyes. Although he couldn't recognize that it was a heavenly rune jade, he had personally witnessed its power. "Don't be careless, don't fail miserably. Native, do you only know how to act fierce with your mouth?" He laughed loudly and continued to provoke Ling Han. 1, 2, 3. Ling Han began to count. "Are you stupid?" Dongqi didn't understand. 5. Ling Han's eyes were filled with killing intent as he charged forward. "Haha, you're courting death." Dongqi laughed. He didn't dodge, waiting for Ling Han to reach him before attacking. That way, Ling Han would take the initiative to attack, and he had absolute confidence that even if Ling Han used the heavenly rune jade, he would be able to dodge or even send it flying with his enlightening realm cultivation. 140 feet, 110 feet, 90 feet, 80 feet. It was absolutely fair. Ling Han raised his right hand, and with a whoosh, the heavenly rune jade was tossed out. Propelled by his telekinesis, it instantly reached 9 times the speed of sound and shot towards Dongqi. What? Dongqi's expression changed drastically because he found that his cultivation had been directly reduced to the extreme bone realm. The formation should not have been activated, so why was his cultivation reduced? Could it be? He suddenly realized that there was a similar formation on Ling Han's body. Oh no! He wanted to dodge, but at 9 times the speed of sound, how could he have the time? Left with no choice, he could only barely block with his hands in front of him. Just as he raised his hands, the heavenly rune jade was broken. Blood splattered, and his hands were broken. The heavenly rune jade did not stop, and continued to smash towards his chest. Dongqi barely dodged, and the heavenly rune jade hit his left rib, instantly tearing off a large piece of flesh and several ribs, forming a bowl-sized hole on his left side. He screamed, but turned and ran without hesitation, his figure flying. He shouldn't have been so weak, but he didn't expect Ling Han to have a formation like absolute fairness. He also had the idea of tricking Ling Han, so he waited until his opponent attacked before counterattacking, causing him to have no time to react. After running far away, he turned back and glared hatefully at Ling Han, then stood up again and disappeared into the distance. Haha, you want to trick my father? You're daydreaming. You asked for it. Don't you know that our father is the ancestor of schemers? The milk babies all laughed and laughed. Ling Han's face darkened. How can you praise people like this? Now that I've been exposed like this, how am I supposed to trick people in the future? Xin Ruyue also broke out in a cold sweat, and looked at Ling Han with a strange gaze. She also thought that Ling Han had been rash, and fell for Dongqi's provocation. Who would have known that Dongqi was the one who failed to trick people and was tricked instead? Both of his hands were destroyed. Unless he found a spirit medicine that could regrow flesh and bones, he would forever be a cripple. Fortunately, she had suppressed her killing intent, or she would have been hit by Ling Han's attack. Brother Ling, you're really good. Xin Ruyue was full of emotion. She was truly convinced. Ling Han had perfectly acted out a drama of the weak defeating the strong, although it was only for an instant. Ling Han smiled. Miss Xin, you're too kind. He pondered for a moment. If he had attacked with his baleful aura before throwing out the heavenly pattern jade, then Dongqi wouldn't have been able to escape. I'll take my leave first. Ling Han cupped his hands towards Xin Ruyue. Please. Xin Ruyue nodded. Her eyes were full of fighting spirit. Since Ling Han could comprehend the stone painting's secret, there was no reason why she couldn't do the same. Ling Han left with the 7 milk babies. Before long, a huge garden appeared in front of them. The ground was covered in green grass, and flowers as tall as a human were about to bloom. These flowers grew very densely and seemed to have no pattern, but if one looked closely, there was a pattern. It was just that he couldn't find it in a short time. With a glance, he could see that the garden was filled with people lying in different positions. Some were facing the sky, some were lying on the ground. From the looks of those who were facing the sky, their faces were rosy, and they didn't seem to be dead. Very soon, Ling Han saw a man crawl up and walk a few steps forward in a daze. He saw a fresh flower bloom beside him. This man fell down again, and after a while, the blooming flower closed up again. Such a scene was still unfolding one after another. It was very comical to see people getting up one by one and falling down after taking a few steps. Reading on the phone was more refreshing. Chapter 3470. A Good Romance. BQG 6. Ling Han understood. This place was not a dead place, and the flowers would only make people dizzy. The problem was that the dizzying effect of the pollen was very strong. Just smelling it would make people unconscious, and it would last for a very long time. Ling Han noticed that after a person fell to the ground, he did not wake up for more than 2 hours. He observed patiently and found that the person only woke up after another hour. Ling Han did not observe only one person. He concluded that most people would be unconscious for about 3 hours, and only a very small number of people could wake up earlier, but only a little earlier. Was this a formation? Ling Han observed. He wanted to know the pattern of the flowers blooming, because the same flower would sometimes bloom when people passed by, and sometimes not. He activated his ocular sorcery, and the world suddenly appeared in front of him in another way. His brain worked at high speed. This garden was too big, and there were too many flowers. It was difficult to find the pattern of each flower's blooming. Ling Han soon gave up the idea of figuring out the pattern of all the flowers blooming, because he only needed to find a path to pass through. He kept observing and deducing, but the amount of calculation was still shocking, because after each flower bloomed, the time and range of the pollen were different. Even with Ling Han's ability, he could only calculate a small area. He let the milk babies enter the spirit-nourishing gourd, and he moved forward alone. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. His steps were light, but after only a few hundred steps, he felt his vision blur, and he fell to the ground. Damn, calculation error, he was hit. He woke up slowly, and his memory recovered instantly. He quickly retreated according to the original path, but he did not want the pollen to be scattered again, and he would be unconscious for another 2 to 3 hours. Ling Han began to calculate again. In fact, his progress was already amazing. It was good enough for others to take a dozen steps, but he could take a few hundred steps. The difference was huge. After a long time, Ling Han started walking again. Ting, ting, ting. After another few hundred steps, Ling Han was hit again and fell to the ground. After waking up this time, Ling Han was in a bit of a dilemma because he had already surpassed most of the people. There were only a few people in front of him, and most of them were lying on the ground. With no one to scout for him, he could only rely on his eye sorcery to observe, and his speed would be much slower. He simply prepared food first. After feeding the 7 milk babies, he also entered the essence-nourishing gourd. The flowers and grass here were dense, so no one would see it. He had overused his brain today and really needed a good rest. The next morning, he immediately came out of the gourd and sat down to cultivate. At this time, the sun had just risen. Ling Han circulated 2 cultivation techniques at the same time. One was the main while the other was the supplementary, and they did not conflict with each other. With the strength of his mental strength, he could do 2 things at once. It was astonishingly fast. In another 4 days, he would be able to reach the peak of the 3rd bone realm. He didn't have to worry about the treasure fruit of life. He had never used the treasure fruit of life that he had prepared before, and it was more than enough for him to reach the 4th bone realm. However, if he wanted to raise the 4 bones, he would have to think of another way. Apart from cultivation techniques, the biggest factor that restricted one's realm was the treasure fruit of life. Without enough treasure fruits of life, who would dare to break through easily? Ling Han put aside the distracting thoughts in his mind, and observed and calculated again. At this time, he could only take 1 step at a time. His speed was much slower than yesterday, but compared to others, his speed could be said to be abnormal. By the end of the day, Ling Han had already walked to the very front. Either someone had already passed, or he would definitely be the first. When the 4th day was about to end, Ling Han unexpectedly discovered that a flower had actually borne fruit. Even from a great distance, he could still feel the incomparably dense aura of life. This was the treasure fruit of life. This was too much of a coincidence. Whatever he was missing, he would get it. Ling Han only thought for a moment, and then put this thought aside. Right now, the most important thing was how to pick it. This was not on the path that Ling Han had to pass through. Instead, it would deviate greatly from the normal path, and it would definitely waste a lot of time. How can picking the treasure fruit of life be considered a waste of time? Ling Han smiled and naturally changed direction without hesitation. The flowers here were much denser, and there was no one to scout ahead. Ling Han could only use his ocular sorcery to search bit by bit, and his progress was very slow. Oh no, I've been tricked. He was not completely flawless, but fortunately, the fragrance was not fatal. 2 hours later, he woke up again and continued forward. After spending a full 2 days, Ling Han finally arrived before the treasure fruit of life. There were a total of 9 fruits on the branch, and they all emitted an extremely dense aura of life. Ling Han had previously obtained an aperture opening level treasure fruit of life, but it was far from comparable to these 9 fruits. Thus, these 9 should be treasure fruits of life of the secret seeking level. Of course, Ling Han would not be polite and put the 9 treasure fruits of life away. He was only at the extreme bone level, and he believed that no matter how monstrous he was, this treasure fruit of life would be enough for him to break through a level. Ling Han was very satisfied. This trip was really not in vain, and he had gained a lot. He returned to the right path and continued forward. Another 2 days later, Ling Han finally walked out of the garden. There was a dense forest in front of him. Ling Han nodded. This was just the right place for him to break through. In these few days, he had reached the peak of 3 bones. Breaking through to 4 bones, his rate of advancement was too fast. He had only been stuck at the level of 3 bones for 10 days, but Ling Han did not have any time to waste. He had to increase his cultivation level as quickly as possible. The benefits hidden in this infant dragon trial had far surpassed his imagination, so he definitely had to get first place. Although the previous battles were very fair, and he could suppress his opponent's cultivation, who could guarantee that the following battles would be the same? Therefore, personal strength was the most reliable. He found a secluded place, and when the sun rose on the 2nd day, he finished the last accumulation of secret force and began breaking through to 4 bones. The advancement of one's cultivation level was the advancement of one's vitality, and to put it bluntly, the advancement of vitality was to tear apart the shackles within one's body. It was as if the heavens had imposed a limit on mortals, and they had to go through this process to become stronger step by step. Ling Han swallowed a treasure fruit of life and began to tear apart the shackles. A shackle was broken, and Ling Han instantly felt a wave of relief. But at the same time, a portion of the life force within his body had been ruthlessly extracted. Fortunately, the essence qi of the treasure fruit of life immediately made up for this deficiency, allowing Ling Han to maintain a strong life force. One after another, the shackles of life were continuously broken. Ling Han grimaced in pain, because along with this process, there were also bone fragments falling off, and new bones were advancing in a more powerful direction. 3 hours later, Ling Han called it a day. 4 bones reading on the phone was more refreshing. Chapter 3471. A Good Romance. BQG 6. CC. With Ling Han's cultivation speed, he would probably be able to break through in less than 10 days. That was fast. Isn't it said that the higher the realm, the slower the cultivation speed? Ling Han thought about what the Calabash brothers had said in the past and couldn't help but have a thought. Perhaps only by embarking on the path of immortality could one truly start the path of martial art. Just like in the origin world, from body refining to shattering void tier, how long would it take in the lower realm, and how long would it take in the immortal realm? In fact, in the celestial realm, some people would directly skip this process at birth. For example, the Calabash brothers were born without any shackles. As long as they grew up, their cultivation would naturally increase. Furthermore, they were existences that could break through the limits. Their level of life was naturally higher than others. Therefore, his cultivation speed was fast not because he was too heaven-defying, but because in the real world of martial art at this stage, it was completely the beginning of the beginning, so it was normal for his cultivation speed to be faster. Wasn't it said that treasured fruits could allow one to reach the heavens in a single step, straight into inscription, opening aperture, and even the secret realm? This could also be used as evidence. Ling Han's fighting spirit was high. In this way, he could reach the secret-seeking realm in the shortest time possible and catch up with the current level of the younger generation. However, after stepping on the celestial path, it would be impossible for him to advance so quickly. Even the innate divine body could not ignore the existence of the realm barrier. For example, after the demon race stepped onto the immortal path, they would no longer have any advantage over the human race. Ling Han released the milk babies. He was well prepared for this trip. At least, he had brought enough food. Not only did he have the spirit-nourishing gourd, but he had also seized many spatial artifacts. All of them were filled with food. Therefore, there was no need to worry about starving to death if they stayed here for too long. The 8 of them continued forward and entered the forest. Ling Han was surprised. He discovered that there were traces of someone walking in front of him. It wasn't a beast, but a human. There was actually someone ahead of him. Ling Han couldn't believe his eyes. He had been far ahead of them before. Although it had taken him some time to collect the treasured fruit of life, he shouldn't have been so far behind. If someone had been in front of him all along, why hadn't he picked the fruit of life? Don't say I don't like it. It's a treasure fruit of life, after all. Forget it, I'll just leave. Ling Han raised his vigilance. After passing through the dense forest, the front suddenly opened up, and a small platform appeared. Behind the platform, the mountain rapidly became steep, and the road was incomparably narrow, only allowing one person to pass through. The platform was filled with stone statues, some resembling humans, some resembling horses, and some resembling carriages. They were divided into red and black. Hey, isn't this like chess? Ling Han saw that the platform was divided into small squares, and the chess pieces were arranged according to the rules. They were definitely chess pieces. Moreover, the game had just begun, and each side had a chess piece that had crossed the boundary. Outside the chessboard, there were many people watching. They were all on one side of him, but there was no one on the other side. When Ling Han looked again, he was slightly startled. This was because on one side of the general and commander's seats was a person, and on the other side was something enveloped by a ball of light. He could not tell what it looked like at all. Formation, Gina Ling Han guessed in his heart. Then, he took a few steps forward and asked someone about the situation. You're really lucky. It was a young man. He was very familiar with Ling Han, and he patted Ling Han's shoulder. We were trapped in that garden for a very, very long time. I don't know what happened, but those flowers actually stopped blooming. That's how we managed to pass through. You don't know, but when those flowers bloom, they can immediately cause people to faint. This person was a bit of a chatterbox. He had clearly asked him about the chessboard, but he had brought up the topic of the garden. Ling Han did not interrupt him, because this also solved one of his doubts. No wonder so many people had run ahead of him. It should be because he was the first to pass through that garden, and after that, it no longer had any effect. Why? Was it to deliberately wait for others? This was not impossible. After all, there were very few people who had cultivated eye techniques, so this stage could cause the first person to lose a lot of the advantage of time. Ling Han had originally left everyone in the dust, but he had rested in the forest for a night, and then spent another 3 hours to break through. Thus, it was not strange that he had been overtaken by others. Then he could be considered to have made a contribution to others. Thinking of the 9 treasure fruits of life, Ling Han suddenly understood. That could be considered as a reward. Cough, cough. Ling Han reminded him. You should get to the point. Why are you still talking about other things? Just at this moment, a scream was heard. Ling Han looked over and saw that in the chess match, the victor had already been decided. This originally wasn't much, but this commander was killed by a horse. With a stomp of the stone horse, that person was stomped into a meat patty. Damn, so ruthless. Hey, you see, this chess match is very cruel, said the young man. If you lose, you will lose your life. Ling Han nodded. You're talking a lot of nonsense. I've already seen it with my own eyes, so there's no need for you to say more. Once this person died, the chess pieces quickly returned to their positions, as if they had a life of their own. This is a formation, Ling Han immediately said in his heart. Brother, this stage's test is really abnormal. It doesn't care about strength, but chess skills. That young man was a bit frantic. Can't we force our way through? Ling Han asked with a smile. That's definitely courting death. That young man hurriedly said, you came too late, so you didn't see it. Before, there were indeed people who tried to force their way through. Some even formed teams, but in the end, they were all instantly annihilated. Hiss, those chariots, horses, soldiers, all of them are boundlessly terrifying. They definitely have the strength of the immortal path. No matter how many people we have, we won't be able to defeat them. Ling Han nodded and said with a smile, then from now on, you should diligently practice your chess skills. This isn't a difficult thing to do. Ari, I'm still learning, that young man said with a bitter expression. Did anyone pass? Ling Han asked again. Not a single one. That young man sighed. The other side's chess skills are shockingly high. Some people thought that they saw through the other side's moves, but in the end, when they went up to fight, they were crushed into pieces. Ling Han nodded, thanked that person, and began to circle around the chessboard. He was a formation master, and to be honest, it was impossible for him to set up such a chessboard that could allow him to compete with others. But what if he directly destroyed the chessboard's formation? He observed, and did not immediately go down to challenge. But the wind whistled, and after that, no one else went down. Clearly, there were too many precedents, and no one wanted to throw their lives away in vain. Haha, a bunch of trash. Watch me. A green-robed man stood up and walked with large strides to the commander's seat. Immediately, a light shadow appeared on the general's seat opposite him, representing the start of the chessboard. Who is that? Someone was curious. Did this guy not see that the people who went down before him had all died? Reading on mobile phones is more refreshing. Chapter 3472. A Good Romance. BQG 6. Following the rugged mountain path, he soon reached the peak. However, there was a flight of steps at the peak, and at the top of the steps was a huge throne. Obviously, the real peak should be that throne. Whoever sat on it would be the representative of the peak. Ling Han let the Calabash brothers out. They were not interested in ascending the peak, so they sat at the side. At their current stage, they did not need any opportunities. As long as they grew normally, they would become powerful cultivators of the celestial path. Even if they were given celestial pills, it would not be very meaningful. Ling Han began to ascend the peak. As soon as he took a step up, there was a flash of light in front of him, and it transformed into a shining golden human figure. It punched at him. Peng Ling Han raised his fist to meet it, but he was directly punched down. What great power! Ling Han stood still, and the golden figure on the steps also slowly disappeared without a trace. He ascended the steps again, and the golden human figure appeared again punching at him. Ling Han did not intend to take it head-on. Instead, he dashed toward the throne at the top. As long as he sat down, perhaps everything would be settled. Why waste time? However, he had only rushed up a few steps when he saw another golden human figure appear, and it punched him heavily. Ling Han could not dodge this punch. Peng, he immediately rolled down the steps. Fortunately, the two golden human figures did not pursue him, but slowly disappeared. Hiss, Ling Han gritted his teeth, and slowly got up. This punch really hurt him, and his bones were broken. He was now in the ultimate bone realm, and he had changed his bones 4 times. His bones should be extremely tough, but they were broken in one blow. It was clear how terrifying the golden human figure's destructive power was. You dare to hit our father? Eldest brother was furious. Go. The 7 milk babies rushed up, and the golden human figures appeared. There were exactly 7 of them, and a chaotic battle immediately began. The Calabash brothers all displayed their abilities. Some of them were extremely strong, some of them aimed at floors, some of them spat fire, some of them spat water, some of them were invulnerable, and some of them absorbed all attacks and reflected them back. Not long after, the 7 milk babies won the first round and destroyed the golden figures. However, before they could take a few steps forward, new golden figures appeared and continued to attack them. The milk babies were very powerful, but they only managed to defeat 3 waves of golden figures before they were blasted down the stairs. Fortunately, they were smart enough and did not suffer any injuries. Damn it, it's so unfair. Second baby wailed. We were only at the peak of the engravement realm, but then an enlightening realm appeared. We can't beat them. If we grow a little bigger, we'll definitely win, 7th baby said with his hands on his hips. Ling Han laughed and said, you guys are already strong enough. Take a break first. As he recovered, he looked at the top of the stairs. Clearly, the enemies that appeared here were more powerful the higher they went. This should also be based on their cultivation, but they were very powerful at the beginning and became more and more powerful. Some of them even had the combat power of the enlightening state. Ling Han thought about it. The first light figure he encountered should be at the 4th level of inscription, which was indeed above him. If he did not use his secret technique, he would naturally be defeated in a head-on fight. As for the second light figure, its strength should be at the 5th level. The problem was that the position where the second figure appeared was still 3/4 of the way to the top of the stairs. In other words, there would be even stronger golden figures that would appear and attack him. With his current cultivation, it seemed like he could not beat them. Let's give it a try first. Ling Han did not wait for his bone injury to recover. Even if he had spirit medicine, it would take 100 days for his tendons and bones to break. Even if he had spirit medicine, he would still need at least 10 days to recover. He could temporarily use his secret technique to fix the broken bones, and it would not affect his battle strength too much. Ling Han climbed up the stairs and began the challenge. Wang, the golden figure, appeared again. Ling Han punched out. This time, he used the demon monkey fist, and its power increased dramatically. Peng, peng, peng. Under a series of attacks, the golden figure was blown up. However, how could it be a match for Ling Han at the engravement realm? He continued to climb the stairs. After a few steps, the second golden figure appeared. 5 veins. Ling Han was still fearless. He was injured by the opponent's punch earlier because he was caught off guard. He also punched back. With the support of the demon monkey fist, his battle strength far exceeded the 5 veins. After a few more punches, the second golden figure was also blown up. He continued to walk. When he was almost halfway up the stairs, the third golden figure appeared. This time, the golden figure's battle strength was even stronger, but it still had not reached the enlightening realm. 6 veins. Ling Han's battle spirit burned. He first fought for a while, and then he started to attack frequently, meeting force with force with force. This kind of direct confrontation was the easiest to determine the winner. As expected, after a few hundred punches, Ling Han won again. Judging from the distance, there should be 2 more golden figures coming to snipe him. Ling Han took a few more steps, and as expected, the 4th golden figure appeared. This golden human figure didn't use his fists. Instead, he brandished a golden spear and thrust it towards Ling Han. Ling Han took out his war hammer. It was instantly activated, and met the spear head-on. Peng! A heavy blow landed. Lightning and golden light flashed. Ling Han felt a sharp pain in his hand, and the war hammer almost fell out of his hand. He retreated continuously, directly retreating from the stairs to the bottom. He gritted his teeth and raised his hand. The hand between his thumb and forefinger had already split open, and blood was flowing. This light figure definitely had the battle strength of the enlightening realm. Ling Han was very strong, very monstrous, but he did not have the ability to fight 2 major realms above him. Absolute fairness, fine, let's try. Ling Han thought. If it was a battle of the same level, he would not need 10 minutes to kill 2 opponents at all. Xiao, he charged again. The first 3 light figures were naturally quickly defeated by him. When the 4th light figure appeared, he immediately activated absolute fairness. However, the light figure's spear was still extremely powerful, and its power did not decrease in the slightest. Peng Ling Han was blasted down again. The wound between his thumb and forefinger immediately split open, and blood flowed out. Damn, this light figure still had the battle strength of the enlightening realm, and was not suppressed at all. Absolute fairness actually had no effect on it. That's right, the formation here was obviously of a higher level, and it was too easy to make absolute fairness ineffective. He thought it through, but the problem was, how to do it. He only had 4 bones, and if he wanted to match the enlightening realm, even 6 bones would not be enough. Either he broke through the inscription pattern, or he went 1 step further, breaking through the limits of limits and advancing to the possibly non-existent 7 bones. Otherwise, he would not be able to match the enlightening realm. Moreover, this was only the 4th light figure. There should be a 5th, and it would be even stronger. Since he had already come this far, Ling Han naturally could not give up. Fine, He would cultivate here and break through the 7 bones. He began to cultivate. A few days later, he heard footsteps. A second person had arrived. Phone reading is more refreshing. Chapter 3473. A Good Romance. BQG 6. Ling Han turned his head to look, and saw that it was a beautiful and moving figure. Korean dramas. Hanj. Shin Ryue. Did she discover the secret of the mural, or did she give up? Ling Han felt that the latter was more likely. After all, deciphering the secrets of the murals required eye techniques, and the possibility of Shin Ryue possessing eye techniques was close to zero. Shin Ryue naturally also saw Ling Han. She nodded towards him, appearing very friendly. In reality, she really wanted to take down Ling Han and force him to hand over the secret of the murals. This was because she was indeed in a hurry and had left without deciphering the secret. However, in this place, if a person of a higher cultivation realm challenged a person of a lower cultivation realm, their cultivation would be weakened. She had personally witnessed Ling Han's ability to fight people of the same cultivation realm. She was definitely no match for him. Therefore, it was impossible for her to make things difficult for Ling Han here. However, the problem was that if she left this place and obtained the secret of the mural, it was extremely likely that she would be killed by the great power behind this training ground. Under such considerations, she had to build a good relationship with Ling Han, to the point where he was willing to tell her the secret of the murals. This could be exchanged with treasures or cultivation techniques. She didn't even mind selling her body. Ling Han also nodded and said, "Miss Shin. Brother Ling is indeed amazing, being the first to arrive here." Shin Ryue said. She swept her gaze across the 7 milk babies and had an awkward expression. She had never seen anyone bring milk babies into an ancient remnant for an adventure. Ling Han smiled. He was still recovering from his injuries, so he didn't have much interest in interacting with others. As he circulated his mystic power, his bone injuries would recover a little faster. If he continued to nurture them, he should be able to shorten the recovery time to 5 days. "Brother Ling, why don't we try and see who can ascend to the top?" asked Shin Ryue. Her beautiful eyes shone. Other than the methods she had considered before, she could also gamble with Ling Han. He was a young man, after all. Of course, he was arrogant. Ling Han smiled. "What are we betting on? I have a cultivation technique here. It's called the Tri-Yang Heaven Nourishing Technique. If you're injured, use this technique. It will be very effective." Shin Ryue said, "It is said that when one trains it to the pinnacle, one can even regrow a severed limb. As long as the vital parts are not damaged, one can recover." Ling Han's eyes lit up involuntarily. Though he could modify the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, it was limited by his cultivation level, and the limitations were too great. Martial artists would inevitably get injured. With this cultivation technique, it was equivalent to having an extra safeguard, or even an extra life. "Miss Shin, what are you looking at?" Ling Han asked with a smile. The fact that she had taken out such a cultivation technique had completely piqued his interest. She must be plotting something. Shin Ryue smiled sweetly. "Ryue wants the cultivation technique that Brother Ling obtained from the murals." Ling Han was surprised. "Didn't you say that this can't be spread to others? Otherwise, we'll be hunted down?" Shin Ryue nodded, "Indeed. However, if I teach it here, Ryue can say that she comprehended it herself." Ling Han looked at his wrist. After he comprehended this cultivation technique, there was an additional mark on his wrist, which disappeared in a flash. He had thought that it would not appear again, but when he circulated that cultivation technique, it appeared again. Could it be that this was not related to the cultivation technique itself, but rather because he had learned it here, and so it was stamped on him so that it could serve as proof in the future? Otherwise, how would that party be able to determine that he had learned it here, or had it been taught by someone else? A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind. With his cultivation level, it was naturally impossible for him to forcefully snatch the cultivation technique from the other party's hands. Here, even absolute fairness would not have any effect. Moreover, the other party had not provoked him, and it was only because the other party had something that he wanted. If he forcefully snatched it away, Then what difference was there between him and those profligate young masters? He had become strong so that he would not be bullied, and not so that he could bully the weak. All right, I'll bet. Ling Han nodded. Xin Ruyue revealed a smile. Since she dared to bet with Ling Han, it was naturally impossible that she had no confidence. She began to climb the steps, and immediately, a glowing silhouette appeared. She was at the enlightenment realm, so the glowing silhouette naturally could not be at the engravement realm, even if this was only her first opponent. They began to fight fiercely. In terms of strength, the glowing silhouette should be stronger, but Xin Ruyue avoided a direct confrontation, and did not fight head-on with her opponent. Her two whips danced in the air, and soon, she gained the upper hand and defeated her opponent. Xin Ruyue held the two whips in her hands and continued forward. After a few steps, the second glowing silhouette appeared. Its strength was obviously much stronger, but it still had not jumped out of the enlightenment realm. Thus, with Xin Ruyue's burst of power, she easily defeated it. She continued forward, and when the third glowing silhouette appeared, the two sides were tied. This glowing silhouette's strength had still not broken through to the mystery-seeking realm, but its battle strength was similar to that of a six-bone realm, and it was tyrannical. After fighting for a long time, Xin Ruyue's secret force was exhausted, and she had no choice but to retreat. Xin Ruyue's expression was somewhat ugly. Before coming here, she had done a lot of homework, and she thought that she had understood everything clearly. She had made ample preparations, and she had also come to the last stage. However, even though she had gone all out, she could only pass half of the steps. She did have some tricks up her sleeves, and it was not difficult to defeat the third opponent. The problem was, there should be two more opponents after this. How was she going to defeat them? She was not worried about the bet, and it was even more impossible for Ling Han to win. However, if she could not reach the top, she would also not be able to become a candidate for the fledgling dragon, and she would not be able to obtain Ling Han's cultivation technique. This naturally made her unhappy. She could only wait. She was clear about the rules here. The earlier the glowing silhouette appeared, the stronger it was. However, if no one could reach the top after a long time, the glowing silhouette's strength would gradually weaken until someone could reach the top. Thus, she could only wait. When she defeated the fourth opponent, she would use the forbidden method to defeat the fifth opponent, and pass in one go. Ling Han felt strange. Why was his opponent a realm higher than him, but Xin Ruyue's opponent was so weak? Could it be that his cultivation was too weak? Sigh, because of his low cultivation, he had suffered so many losses. Thus, he had to cultivate with peace of mind, and reach 7 bones as soon as possible. If possible, then he would advance into the engravement realm. Ling Han first recovered from his injuries, and when the sun rose the next day, he began to cultivate. After a day, someone finally arrived, but this person was even worse. He did not even defeat the first glowing silhouette. He wanted to leave but was unwilling, so he also waited at the side. Ling Han felt strange. What was the point of waiting like this? Could it be that by waiting, one's strength would become stronger, or the opponent's strength would become weaker? Soon, he was surprised to find that the glowing silhouette's strength would indeed weaken. On the third day, Xin Ruyue defeated the third glowing silhouette, although the fourth glowing silhouette was defeated in just one move. That was already the battle strength of the mystery-seeking realm, and it was not something she could match. There was such a thing. Reading on the phone was more refreshing. Chapter 3474. BQG6, CC BQG6. CC. Fortunately, the strength of the silhouette was weakened by a very small amount. In other words, it would still take a long time for Xin Ruyue to pass safely. Ling Han also went forward to fight. Sure enough, his opponent was also weakened, but not by much. He continued to cultivate. After 5 days, as expected, his bone injuries and hand injuries had all healed, and his cultivation had almost reached the peak of the 4th bone. He would be able to break through to the 5th bone in 1 or 2 days at most. He was a little anxious because the strength of the silhouette was getting weaker day by day. Although it was only a little bit weaker each day, who knew if Xin Ruyue would break through in a few days? This woman seemed very confident, which made Ling Han believe that she had a secret treasure on her. It was very likely that she would use it after defeating the fourth silhouette and rush to the throne in one fell swoop. Therefore, this fourth silhouette was the safety line. Once it was defeated, Shinryue would probably be able to break through like a hot knife through butter. There was not much time left. More and more people came, but none of them could match up to Shinryue. If they wanted to pass, they did not know how many times they would have to wait for the formation to weaken the silhouette's combat power. Another 2 days passed, and Ling Han quietly returned to the forest from before. He found a very secluded place and began to break through to the fifth bone. For him, as long as he had the treasure fruit of life, success would come naturally. To be on the safe side, he also set up a large formation that was absolutely fair, and the 7 Calabash brothers were responsible for guarding it. This way, even if an expert or genius like Shinryue came, it would be impossible for her to break through the Calabash brothers. Crack, crack, crack. The shackles in his body were broken one after another, and layer after layer of bone fragments fell off, causing him to grit his teeth and groan. It was really too uncomfortable. After 3 hours, Ling Han finished breaking through the hierarchy of life. He couldn't help but think that he had torn apart many more shackles than ordinary people when they broke through. But even so, there seemed to be countless shackles in his body. Just how many shackles did the heavens impose on these mortal bodies? Father, why is the innate divine body so powerful? Second baby seemed to be able to see through Ling Han's thoughts and said, in fact, although the innate divine body suppresses mortals greatly when they are below the immortal path, this suppression will become even greater after they step onto the immortal path. Why? It's because the innate divine body doesn't have the shackles of the heavens and earth, and no matter how a mortal tries to break through the shackles, it can't achieve perfection. This kind of breakthrough brought about a huge improvement. Ling Han felt that his current strength was enough to fight against an early enlightening realm cultivator. The enlightening realm was a continuous process, so it was not divided into several levels. It was divided into early, middle, late, and complete stages. After stabilizing his realm, he went to the peak of the mountain. At this time, Shinryue was fighting with the fourth silhouette. After 100 moves, she was defeated and retreated. The situation was not good. Previously, she could not even take one move, but now she could fight for 100 moves. In a few days, she might be able to tie and win. At that time, she could use her secret weapon and crush the fifth silhouette. Brother Ling Shinryue was not injured. She smiled at Ling Han and said confidently, "It seems that Ryue is about to win this bet. If Miss Shin really wins, I will definitely give you the cultivation technique," Ling Han said indifferently. Brother Ling is really trustworthy. Shinryue flattered. Ling Han naturally did not take it to heart. The outcome had not been decided yet, so it was too early for her to be happy. He started to ascend. The first, second, and third silhouette appeared one after another, but they were all easily defeated by Ling Han. Now that his cultivation had improved greatly, the silhouette's strength had been greatly weakened. Naturally, it could not withstand a single blow. The fourth silhouette appeared. Ling Han clenched his fist and punched out, and the silhouette of light immediately parried with the divine spear. Peng, the fist and spear collided. Ling Han only felt a slight pain in his fist, but his feet did not retreat in the slightest. In this way, he had already surpassed the fourth silhouette in terms of combat strength. Ling Han estimated that the silhouette's strength had already fallen to the enlightening realm, but it was comparable to an inscription level 6. He lightly snorted and swung both his fists violently. In just 100 moves, he had already defeated the silhouette. He could originally defeat all inscription warriors, not to mention now that he had reached the 6th bone. Seeing that Ling Han had won, Shinryue's pretty face changed. Reading on the phone is more refreshing. Chapter 3476. A Good Romance. BQG 6. See Sither throne rose into the air. Xiao, the vitality-nurturing gourd at Ling Han's waist, was suddenly pulled down by a mysterious force, falling towards the top of the mountain. Ling Han wanted to grab it, but his body was bound to the throne by a powerful force, so he could only call out, "Eldest baby, take the gourd and go down the mountain first." "I'm done," eldest baby said in a childish voice, running over to catch the gourd. Ling Han did not worry. If anyone wanted to snatch it, then eldest baby would not lose to anyone at the same cultivation level. The 9 mountain peaks gave off blazing light at the same time, as if they were splitting the heavens and the earth. In the sky, a palace appeared, floating in mid-air, emitting a boundless aura. Shoo, shoo, shoo. The 8 thrones also flew towards the palace in the sky. The 9 thrones gathered, and then landed on a huge square in front of the palace. It was paved with white jade-like stones, and could almost be said to be a mirror. Ling Han only felt his body relax. Previously, when he sat on the throne produced a strong suction force on him and fixed him on it. But temporarily losing his freedom was not a bad thing, because he could feel the astonishing energy coming from the throne, improving his physique in all aspects. This was not an increase in his cultivation, but an increase in the essence of life, and there were many benefits. Unfortunately, when the throne's restraint disappeared, this kind of improvement also disappeared. Ling Han's heart moved, and he looked at the other 8 thrones. These people had sat on them for at least a few days, and how many benefits had they obtained? He stood up, and landed on the square. The other 8 people did the same, standing up one after another. Since the benefits were gone, what was the point of sitting? Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he saw 2 familiar faces. Hong Tianbu, Princess Bai Xiao. The other 6 people were completely unfamiliar, and he did not know any of them. The 5th peak is really weak. After waiting for so many geniuses, someone won, a man said disdainfully. He had the head of a tiger, and his ferocious aura was overwhelming. I let you enjoy a few more days. Are you still not satisfied? An extremely burly man said with a smile, and his black and white eyes like a bear's head was especially eye-catching. Bah, there's only 3 days in total. There won't be any benefits after that. It's not like you don't know that. The tiger-headed man sneered, staring at Ling Han with a terrifying ferocity. A mere extreme bone realm can also win. Just what kind of trash is this 5th peak? No wonder it's so slow. Hu Taifeng, he is Ling Han. Another man said. He had a pair of huge wings on his back, and his feet were bare. Upon closer inspection, they were actually a pair of claws that emitted a cold glint like that of refined iron. Ling Han's gaze turned cold. The demon race had 4 Heaven's Pride experts, Hu Taifeng, Xiong Bao, and Ying Po Kong. So, this tiger-headed man was definitely Hu Taifeng, bear-headed man was Xiong Bao, and bird-headed man was Ying Po Kong. The monster race was indeed powerful. Crushing the human race in the immortal path wasn't just a joke. Adding Princess Bai Xiao, they already occupied at least 4 spots. Moreover, it was said that Hu was even stronger, so he definitely wouldn't be squeezed out. He swept his gaze over the 8 people, and his gaze locked onto an outrageously handsome man. This man's handsomeness was enough to make women jealous. If he were to change into women's clothes, he would definitely be a peerless beauty. He had a kind of beauty that transcended gender. He could be seen as handsome, but could also be seen as beautiful. Why was he so sure? Because he had a pair of furry ears and a tail that stuck out, but this didn't affect his charm at all. Hu was the #1 expert of the monster race's younger generation, a secret realm expert. Ling Han didn't know who was stronger, him or Princess Bai Xiao, but if the 2 of them were to face each other in a fair fight, he would definitely lose. Even if he really reached the 7 bone realm, or even the engravement realm, he still wouldn't be a match for a secret realm expert. Alright, just the demon race alone took up 5 spots. Adding him and Hong Tianbu, there were only 2 people whose identities were still unknown. He looked over and saw a man and a woman. The man was tall and slender, and should be a pure human. He was also very handsome, but with Hu here, perhaps no one would dare to call themselves a handsome man. There was also a woman. Let's not talk about whether she was beautiful or not, just her figure was enough to scare people to death. Sturdy. She was at least as sturdy as 4 Ling Han's combined. One of her arms was already as thick as a normal person's thigh. Her body was wrapped in 2 pieces of beast skin, revealing a large area of her skin. But obviously, it was impossible for her to attract anyone's attention. This kind of spring scenery was politely declined. She also carried a mace on her back, and her eyes were like copper bells. It seemed like she would hit whoever she didn't like with the mace. Did you guys notice that there's an additional mark on your wrist? Ying Po Kong didn't continue to harp on the issue of Ling Han. Because according to the rumors, this brat had an unclear relationship with Her Highness the Princess, and it wasn't something they could casually gossip about. Yes, what is this thing? I can't see it now. Hu Taifeng nodded. Ling Han also lowered his head. Just now when he got off the throne, he really did notice that there was an additional mark on his wrist. It flashed for a moment and then disappeared. Adding this to the fact that he had received merit from the mural, he had already been struck with 2 stamps. Who cares? Xiong Bao looked at Ling Han, Hong Tian Bu, and the other 2 humans. If it were up to me, we should first get rid of these 4 humans. Alright, this whelp dragon can only belong to our demon race. Humans can stand aside. Ying Po Kong nodded. Hong Tian Bu clasped his hands behind his back and said indifferently, if you want to die, then go ahead. It was a simple sentence, but it was filled with deterrence. Princess Bai Xiao waved her hand and said, we still don't know the situation inside, let's enter the palace first. Yes, Your Highness. Xiong Bao, Ying Po Kong, and Hu Taifeng all nodded. They were very respectful in front of this demon race princess. Even Hu bowed slightly, expressing his respect for Princess Bai Xiao. Let me introduce myself, I am Wu Lidong. That slender human said. I am Plum Blossom. The sturdy woman also said, her voice rumbling like thunder. She even patted her chest, causing waves to ripple. That must be muscles, Ling Han said with certainty. Did Plum Blossom provoke you? Why do you have to go against Plum Blossom? If you do this, I'll have a different opinion of Plum Blossom in the future. Ling Han. He also said. Hong Tian Bu was arrogant, as if he disdained to be associated with them. Who is that guy? He's so arrogant. Plum Blossom used her hand to cover her mouth and asked in a low voice. But her voice was only a little bit lighter than a shout from an ordinary person. Hong Tian Bu naturally heard it clearly. He couldn't help but frown, and a trace of killing intent circulated around him. Ling Han laughed. A guy who thinks he's infallible. Ling Han, are you courting death? Hong Tian Bu said coldly. Ling Han immediately shouted exaggeratedly, my dear Bai Xiao, someone wants to murder your dear husband. Cell phone reading is more refreshing. Chapter 3478. A Good Romance. BQG 6. See the basic battle prowess of the Rockman was the same. In other words, no matter if they were in the mystery-seeking realm or the extreme bone realm, after fusing with the Rockman, there would be no difference in strength. The difference was the ability to fight above one's level. The higher this ability was, the stronger the Rockman would be. Ling Han first had to get used to every move after fusing with the Rockman. This was called compatibility. It was like riding a horse. If one did not have good compatibility with the horse, it was very easy to fall off the horse. No matter how fast the horse was, could it escape? Besides, he had not entered the palace yet, so there was no death ray. He could only cultivate for half an hour a day, so he was not in a hurry. He did not know what this Rockman was made of. When he stuck his body to it, the stone was like water, soft and not resistant to force. His whole body sank into it. He entered the interior of the Rockman, and his whole body was wrapped in a layer of soft and bouncy stuff. His eyes could not see, but after he released his divine sense, everything around him was immediately captured in his sea of consciousness. Ling Han lifted his foot, and instantly, the Rockman also lifted its foot, landing high up. Peng, the earth shook, and the Rockman immediately slanted, almost losing its balance and falling to the ground. The current him was like a baby learning to walk. But he was not a real baby, after all. He quickly got used to this rhythm, and walked steadily. He tried swinging his fist. Boom, the Rockman also clenched its fist and punched out. It was like a tiger, but the strength was not very strong, at most a few tens of thousands of kilograms. Ling Han tried to use the demon monkey fist, and the Rockman immediately moved crookedly. Although it was somewhat similar, it was completely unable to unleash the true power of the demon monkey fist. He used the Thunder Light Fist, and it was the same. It only had the form, but not the spirit. It was completely unable to unleash the speed of the Thunder Light Fist. Psyche power was also not good, unable to communicate with high-level energy. This time, his strength had fallen to rock bottom. Whether it was martial techniques, psyche power, or magic tools, they were all completely useless. What he needed to develop now was the rockman's battle prowess. To enter the palace door had to be opened first. Xiong Bao and Hu Taifeng had already pushed the door, but the rockman was too big for the two of them to stand side by side. They could only do it one by one. But no matter how the two of them took turns, they could not open the stone door. If you can't even get through the door, how can you talk about getting first place? Their powers were limited, and they could only use the stone golem's own power. Therefore, it wasn't that the stone golem's power wasn't enough to open the door, but that their compatibility with the stone golem wasn't high enough. For example, the basic strength of the stone golems was 100,000 pounds, but they could only unleash 30,000 pounds or 40,000 pounds. Naturally, it was not enough. This was very natural. In the beginning, it was difficult for them to even make the stone golem walk normally, so it was naturally even more difficult for them to fully unleash the power of the stone golem. This was an advanced ability. Thus, all 9 of them commanded the stone golem to continuously throw punches and kicks to increase the compatibility as quickly as possible. It was so late that they did not want to sleep. No one wanted to waste time. The next morning, Ling Han exited the stone statue and began to cultivate. Unexpectedly, he wasn't the only one. Wu Lidong, Hong Tianbiyu, and Hu were all cultivating while facing the rising sun. Obviously, they hadn't reached the peak of their current realm, and still had room for improvement. Ling Han sensed for a moment and discovered that the speed at which Hong Tianbiyu and Hu extracted the power of heaven and earth was frighteningly fast. Obviously, the two of them had deciphered the mural's secret and obtained the inheritance. Hong Tianbiyu was able to do it, probably because he had fused with the eye of an ancient vicious creature. Therefore, he could see things that ordinary people couldn't. But what about Hu? Could it be that he had also cultivated an eye technique? Ling Han suppressed this doubt in his heart. Half an hour later, he re-entered the stone golem and continued to increase the compatibility. Compatibility, 50%. In the afternoon, a cold and indifferent voice resounded in Ling Han's sea of consciousness. Was this the stone golem talking to him? It wasn't very accurate to say that it was a conversation. It was just a message. It turned out that he had only reached 50% compatibility. Ling Han tried to push the door, and this time, he immediately received a message: you must reach 90% compatibility before you can open the door. Only when you reach 100% compatibility will your own basic attributes be added to the incarnation. Well, it was quite complicated. Ling Han continued to increase the compatibility. He discovered that, in this process, he had a new understanding of the word foundation. He had always thought that he had a perfect foundation, and this was true. However, he had neglected the most basic punches and palms. This couldn't be blamed on him, because once he could release his strength, no matter what technique it would no longer be restricted to the form. In any case, as long as he punched, the power would be released. What mattered was whose strength was stronger and who could attract more high-level energy. But now, he felt that he was wrong. The foundation couldn't be ignored. In an evenly matched confrontation, whoever had a better foundation would obtain the final victory. This trial was very interesting. It never took the initiative to tell you what you should do and let you comprehend it on your own. Ling Han nodded. He no longer felt that it was boring. Instead, he was enjoying it. After one day, his compatibility had reached 60%. It had only increased by 10%, which was far from the efficiency of the first day. Starting from 0, the improvement was naturally the greatest. Ling Han didn't take it to heart. Early the next morning, he continued to cultivate. Everyone seemed to know that they had to reach 90% compatibility in order to open the palace door. Therefore, they all practiced with all their might. Soon, 3 days passed. Although Ling Han didn't bring the spirit-nurturing gourd with him, his spatial artifact wasn't affected. Therefore, He still had something to fill his stomach and didn't need to worry about starving. His compatibility finally increased to 90%. What made him even happier was that he had reached the peak of 6 bones. The Monkey King's technique, the stone wall's supplementary technique, and the recovery of the natural environment had created such a miracle. Ling Han began to break through the 7 bones. However, he had no clue. Although out of 10,000 engravement realm cultivators, only 10 or 20 might have cultivated 6 bones in the extreme bone realm, at least there were traces of it. However, 7 bones was not even a legend. He didn't even know if there was such a realm. Ling Han didn't know that there were 7 transformations before. After breaking through 6 transformations, the plane's power in his body suddenly activated and helped him reach 7 transformations. Therefore, Ling Han didn't know if there was a level of 7 bones. But no matter what, he had to think about it again and again. If he missed this level, then his cultivation path wouldn't be perfect. Ling Han used the plane's power in his body to reach 7 transformations. Now, this should be the key. However, no matter how hard he tried, the bones in his body had reached their limit after 6 transformations. No matter what he did, he couldn't shed any more bone fragments. It was possible to break through the shackles, but not the bones, but the organs in his body. This meant that Ling Han was about to enter the engravement realm. This didn't fit Ling Han's plan. Reading on the phone was more refreshing. Chapter 3479. A Good Romance. BQG 6. Cisa time quietly passed, and everyone's compatibility with the golem was increasing. Although the higher the compatibility, the harder it was to increase it further, 90% was still within reach. 2 days later, Hong Tian Bu was the first to push open the palace gate. Ka, the palace gate opened with a loud sound. Even with the golem's tall figure blocking the light, Ling Han could still see a dazzling light flickering inside. Is this the death ray? You'll die if you shine it on me. Who would dare to use their body to test it? This was risking their life. Hong Tian Bu entered without hesitation. Peng, 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 the golem heavily stomped on the ground, creating a loud sound. After he entered, the palace gate closed. Even if someone wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to sneak in, it would be impossible. But after a while, Fox 2 walked forward and easily pushed open the palace gate. Ling Han saw it and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. On the surface, Fox 2's progress was slower than Hong Tian Bu's, but when he pushed open the gate, it was very easy. What did this mean? His compatibility with the golem should be more than 90%. This number 1 genius of the monster race really couldn't be underestimated. After a while, Princess Bai Xiao also walked forward and pushed open the stone gate. She was also very relaxed. But the 4th person to enter the palace was beyond Ling Han's expectations. It was actually that thick plum blossom. She looked stupid, but her comprehension was actually so high. On this day, 4 people entered. On the second day, the remaining 4 people reached 90% compatibility and pushed the door open. Only Ling Han was left. In fact, he had already reached 100% compatibility, but he didn't want to enter until he broke through to the 7th transformation. What should he do? He didn't have much time to waste. Although the 8 people entering the palace would inevitably be fierce and wouldn't be smooth sailing, as time passed, someone would definitely win. Ling Han thought for a while and decided to give himself 3 days. If he didn't break through in 3 days, he could only enter. At worst, he wouldn't break through to the engravement realm. He had to try his best to perfect his realm. He continued to adapt to the stone man's fighting rhythm. After reaching 100% compatibility, Ling Han's own attributes would be added to the stone man's body, so his current strength had broken through 100,000 jin, almost 150,000 jin. Looking at it this way, even though there was a huge difference in everyone's combat prowess, when it was reflected on the stone man, the gap was much smaller. He was such a monster, yet his basic strength had only increased by 50%. The day passed quickly, but Ling Han was still clueless. He became more and more anxious as he paced around the entrance of the palace. When the sun rose the next day, Ling Han's eyes turned cold. He decided to take the risk. In the eyes of many people, the breakthrough of the 6 bones was already good enough. It only allowed him to go from being invincible across a major realm to being invincible across a major realm, but it was still very impressive. But to Ling Han, he could not accept the fact that there was such a high mountain peak, yet he did not climb it. Why would you take such a risk? Actually, this was also a flash of inspiration for Ling Han. Since he was tearing the shackles and carving inscription patterns on his internal organs, then couldn't he take the initiative to shatter the bones and push the shackles to shatter? This was indeed a risk, because it might not work, but the damage he would do to himself was real. However, Ling Han was a person who liked to take risks. Stake it all. He sat down cross-legged and started to cut off the bone fragments, practicing the breakthrough of the extreme bone realm. Ah, pain, pain, pain. He used his secret power as a blade and scraped across the bone. Indeed, he cut off some bone fragments, but incomparable pain immediately attacked him. He clenched his teeth and immediately stopped. In the past, when he broke through, the process of bone scraping happened automatically and didn't need him to push it. Therefore, he could endure the pain. But now, even though it was so painful, he still had to push it himself. It was like when a blade cut on the body, the hand would naturally stop. Could he still be ruthless? Even if he could cut off once, he would have to cut again. What about the 3rd, 4th? Difficult. Ling Han's fighting spirit was reignited. If it wasn't difficult, then why hadn't the world heard of the legend of the 7 bones? Because of this, after entering the 7 bones, people would experience earth-shattering changes. Again, Ling Han pushed his secret power again and continued to cut off the bone. However, even though cold sweat was rolling down his forehead, he didn't feel any signs of a leap in life level. Could it be that the 7 bones really didn't exist? Ling Han didn't believe it. It was because the 7 bones was almost impossible to achieve that there were no rumors of it in the world. If he gave up now, then what difference would he be from a mediocre commoner? It was precisely because of the nothingness that once he broke through, the battle strength he obtained would naturally be strong enough to strike the heavens. It seemed that he wasn't ruthless enough to himself. Ling Han clenched his teeth and decided to give it a shot. Shatter the bone again. Ling Han had always been a crazy person when it came to cultivation. His eyes shone brightly as he circulated his secret power and started to shatter his bones. 7 transformations, a qualitative change akin to rebirth. That would allow him to shatter all the old things and welcome a new beginning. Of course, Ling Han wasn't crazy to the extreme, because even if he failed, as long as he merged with the Stone Man, his battle strength wouldn't be affected. Crack, crack, crack. His bones continued to shatter, and Ling Han couldn't even maintain a cross-legged posture. He slumped to the ground like a plate of loose sand. Should he continue? Continue? Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued to shatter his broken bones, from 2 to 4, from 4 to 8, but his life level still didn't change. This was enough to make one despair, right? Ling Han didn't think so. He believed that there must have been countless geniuses and madmen in history who had broken through to the 7 bones. Didn't they think of this move? Again, again, again. Ling Han became even crazier as he began to grind his bones. Instantly, he felt death approaching. Humans couldn't be boneless. Bones supported the most basic form of the body. If all his bones turned into powder, would he still be a human? Ling Han used his secret power to simulate bones, supported his body, and continued the process of shattering his bones. He believed that most of the people in history were scared stiff when they reached this step. This was for the sake of pursuing the most powerful, not courting death. Meanwhile, there were some who continued, but instead died. Thus, he had to think of another way. Ling Han's heart stirred, and he began to mobilize the power of the plane in his body. As his will flowed, it instantly affected all the living beings in those planes. In this inner world, Ling Han was the ruler. Billions of living beings responded in unison, emitting a weak will toward him, as if to encourage him, but also as if to give him some kind of power. It could even be called a blessing. A miraculous scene finally appeared. His broken bones glowed brilliantly, and the upgrade of his life's hierarchy finally arrived. 7 bones. Begin phone reading is more refreshing. Chapter 3481. A Good Romance. BQG 6. Sisi Peng, Peng, Peng. The golem sprinted. It did not know Qigong, nor did it know any movement techniques. It only relied on its immense strength to move. With a single leap, it leaped far away, and with another step, it had left a distance of several meters behind. The palace was very large and spacious. Otherwise, the golem, which was 15 meters tall, would not even be able to stand straight. Along the way, Ling Han passed by many doors. From the looks of it, they should have been tightly shut, but they had been violently smashed open. There were obvious signs of damage. This actually benefited Ling Han, as he passed through them effortlessly. He ran, and after about 4 hours, he finally saw 8 golems in front of him. They were in an intense battle, 3 against 5. It should be the 5 demons ganging up on the 3 humans. The 9 golems all had slight differences. Ling Han used his previous memories to match the 8 of them. This was Hong Tianbu, this was Princess Bai Xiao, and this was Hu Er. He was able to recognize all 8 of them with a single glance. Hearing the huge commotion caused by Ling Han's arrival, the 8 of them stopped fighting at the same time and looked at him. Ling Han, you're finally here. Wu Lidong transmitted his divine sense. His voice could not be transmitted out of the golem, so he could only communicate with his divine sense. Ling Han smiled and similarly replied with his divine sense, "Am I late? It's better to be late than never." Plum Blossom also said, "We can't hold on much longer." Only Hong Tianbu did not speak. He was too arrogant and thought that he alone could sweep away the 5 demons. The others would only be a burden to him and would only have the opposite effect. You spent so many geniuses to reach a 90% compatibility. Do you expect him to be able to turn the situation around for you? Xiong Bao laughed loudly. He leaped over and smashed a fist towards Ling Han. Watch me finish him off with one punch. The golem sprinted over and waved its fist. Rumble, there were no variations, but the momentum was astonishing. Ling Han clenched his fist and pulled his elbow back slightly. Then, when Xiong Bao rushed over, he punched again. Bam! The 2 stone fists smashed into each other, and Xiong Bao was forced to retreat several dozen feet in a single breath. Only when he collided with a pillar did his retreat finally stop. Everyone was stunned by the punch. Damn, that was too fierce. No matter how great the difference in their cultivation was before, no matter how great the difference in their battle prowess was, after merging with the Stone Man, the difference was greatly reduced. Even those as strong as Hu Er and Hong Tian Bu only had a strength of 140,000 jin. Princess Bai Xiao had a strength of 130,000 jin, while Xiong Bao, Mai Hua, and the others had a strength of 120,000 jin. There was indeed a difference, but with such a small difference in strength, it was very difficult to make a decisive decision. On the contrary, the demons had the advantage in numbers, so they had the upper hand. Inside the Stone Man, one could not use movement techniques or martial techniques. It was like a fight between ordinary people. They could only compete on strength and adaptability. Inside the palace, there were many sealed doors that needed to be broken open. Therefore, even if Xiong Bao and the others had entered late, they still managed to catch up with Hong Tian Bu, Hu Er, and the others. As the number of people increased, the battle became more and more deadlocked. If they could easily finish the battle, they would have reached the end of the palace by now. But now, Ling Han's punch had actually forced Xiong Bao to retreat more than 30 meters. Perhaps the power was not limited to that. This strength was too terrifying. In an instant, the other 8 people felt an intense fear. If everyone's strength was equal, then it would be fine, as they could restrain each other. But now, Ling Han outshone others, and it aroused the hostility of the other 8 people. If it was a fair competition, who would be Ling Han's opponent? This brat had stayed outside for so long, so it was not that his compatibility was increasing slowly, but that he was increasing his battle prowess. The problem was, how did he obtain this? Only the ability to fight above one's level could increase the strength of the Stone Man, but this ability could be increased after 2 or 3 days of training. When Ling Han saw this, he knew what these 8 people were thinking. They had to get rid of themselves first, otherwise, none of them would be able to reach the top. Only when their strength was equal would there be a possibility of competition. Otherwise, it would be a one-sided abuse. Ling Han smiled slightly, not caring at all. He was the strongest of the same level, why would he be afraid of being ganged up on? Come. He took the initiative to attack. Human brat, you're too arrogant. Ying Pokong welcomed him, taking the initiative to attack. Hu Taifeng cooperated closely with him, attacking from the other side. Ling Han was fearless, and when the two of them came close, he swung both fists. Bang bang! The two stone men were instantly repelled by him, but Ling Han also took 2 punches. Although they did not harm him at all, he received a notification. The defensive energy has been weakened by 30%. When it falls to 0, the avatar will receive damage. When the damage reaches 100%, it will not be able to continue fighting. The defensive energy will automatically recover when not in combat, recovering 1 point every 10 seconds. Ling Han was shocked. So there was such a setting. No wonder Xiong Bao stopped attacking after taking 1 punch. The defensive energy had definitely been blasted away, or it was nearing the bottom, so he needed to leave the battle and wait for the defensive energy to recover. Little brother Ling, I'm sorry. Plum Blossom also attacked. Ling Han's strength had already surpassed the threat of the Yarrow race. At least if it was 3 against 5, although they were at a disadvantage, it was not that they could not fight. But if they did not send Ling Han out first, then whether it was the Yarrow race 5 or the human race 3, they would not be Ling Han's match. Ling Han chuckled, completely fearless. He swung his fists to meet them. Bang bang bang, he fought fiercely with Plum Blossom. The others were not idle either, rushing forward one after another, joining the ranks of the encirclement. However, Hu Taifeng, Xiong Bao, and Ying Pokong did not go forward. They were making use of the time to recover their defensive energy. This was very disadvantageous to Ling Han. He had lost a portion of his defensive energy, and it was impossible to recover under the encirclement. After a long battle, the defensive energy would definitely be exhausted, and the following attacks would cause damage to the stone men, until he was knocked out of the ranks of the competition. You guys are too simple-minded. Ling Han's legs bent slightly, and he suddenly exploded with power. Peng, the stone man instantly soared into the sky, leaping up to a height of 9 zhong. He grabbed onto the ornaments on the ceiling, and jumped like an ape. Peng, when his figure landed on the ground, he had already appeared beside Xiong Bao and the other 2. F***ck, he could do this. Hong Tian Bu and the other 4 were all shocked. They had naturally tried the stone man's jumping ability, but they could only jump up to a height of 3 zhong. The main reason was that the stone man was too heavy, and even if it had a strength of over 100,000 jin, it was still impossible for it to jump very high. This was not enough to touch the ceiling, and naturally could not be like Ling Han, who had escaped from the battle like an ape. After fusing with the stone man, everyone's reactions were slightly slow. They sluggishly turned around, and rushed towards Ling Han. Ling Han smiled, and punched repeatedly at Xiong Bao. Phone reading is more refreshing. Chapter 3482. A Good Romance. BQG 6. Cisi Xiong Bao was helpless, he could only fight against Ling Han. Otherwise, if he was hit in his weak spot, his defensive energy would drop even faster. But in this kind of fight, the stronger one would win. Every time he received a punch, he would be pushed back, and his defensive energy would drop in a straight line. In just 3 punches, his defensive energy was completely gone. Peng peng peng. Ling Han attacked again and again, every punch made Xiong Bao's golem retreat. From the outside, the golem was not injured at all, but only Xiong Bao himself knew how terrible his current situation was. Incarnation damage, 30%. Incarnation damage, 42%. Incarnation damage, 56%. Incarnation. He kept receiving notifications like this, making him anxious and shocked. If the damage reached 100%, it meant that the golem would lose its use, and he would no longer be able to control it. And in this place filled with deathlight, how would he dare to move without the golem? He would not die, but he would probably have to wait for the fledgling dragon to appear before he could leave this place. It was said that the winner of the fledgling dragon trial would obtain a great opportunity. He did not want to miss it. Ah! He roared, fighting back. However, in front of absolute power, his resistance was like a splash in the ocean, insignificant. In this kind of battle, blood chi boiling was useless, ultimate techniques were useless, and magic tools were useless. Incarnation damage, 74%. Incarnation damage, 89%. Incarnation damage, 100%. You have lost the ability to move. Xiong Bao discovered that he could no longer control the golem. It's over. Ling Han received a reminder, your enemy has lost the ability to fight, there is no need to attack anymore. Good, one down. He turned around, and at this time, Hong Tianbiyu and the other 5 finally arrived. He laughed, and once again leapt up, breaking through the encirclement, landing towards Ying Po Kong and Hu Taifeng. Boom! The two punched out at the same time, towards Ling Han. We've been waiting for you, the two said. Ling Han sidestepped, dodging Hu Taifeng's fist, and then returned with a punch, colliding with Ying Po Kong. Peng! Ying Po Kong was no match, and retreated. Ling Han gave another flying kick, sending Hu Taifeng flying. Then, he chased after Ying Po Kong. On the other side, Hong Tianbiyu and the other 4 were in hot pursuit. If they allowed Ling Han to defeat them one by one, they would all be finished. However, Ling Han had the advantage in every aspect, whether it was strength or speed. Bang bang bangaling Han violently abused Ying Po Kong. Under a series of angry punches, Ying Po Kong didn't even have the strength to resist. Teng, 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 he could only continuously retreat. Meanwhile, in Ying Po Kong's sea of consciousness, the notifications he received did not stop. Finally, Ling Han received a notification saying that Eagle Splitter had died. Okay, only 6 left. He fixed his gaze on Hu Taifeng, but Hu Taifeng had learned his lesson this time, and stood together with Hong Tianbu and the others. Haha, can this be considered a sincere cooperation? Ling Han laughed. Hong Tianbiyu was instantly enraged. In terms of true battle prowess, he would be able to crush Ling Han with a single finger, but in this current situation, he was actually unable to do anything to Ling Han even after joining forces with others. This was a result that he could not accept. He killed his way out alone. Although there was a gap in strength between the two, he believed that with his own battle skills, he could definitely suppress Ling Han. However, it was useless. Ling Han had previously constantly practiced his basic movements, and had grasped the essentials of each punch, palm, and kick perfectly. In terms of battle skills, Ling Han did not lose at all. Thus, the difference in strength was completely reflected. Under Ling Han's violent attacks, Hong Tianbu's stone golem's defensive energy was quickly destroyed, and the damage greatly increased. Fortunately, the others rushed over and helped him resolve his predicament. The defensive energy would recover after leaving the battle, but the damage could not be recovered. Even if Ling Han was killed by them, Hong Tianbu would still be in an extremely disadvantageous position in the following battle. Ling Han already had victory in his grasp. Using his more agile movement technique, he unceasingly attacked the 6 people who were at the edge, exhausting their defensive energy. In any case, everyone was in a state of battle, and no one would be able to recover their defensive energy. After half a day's time, the 6 people's defensive energy was more or less completely worn out. If this continued, victory would inevitably belong to Ling Han. Hua made a prompt decision and said, "Princess, you go first, I'll block here." Hu Taifeng clenched his teeth and said, "That's right, Princess, you go first." If this continued, victory would belong to Ling Han. Although Ling Han had an unclear relationship with their princess, he was still not the demon race's son-in-law. At this time, they naturally could not let him go. Princess Bai Xiao slightly hesitated, then turned around and went to break the door. Hong Tianbu originally wanted to stop her, but after thinking about it, he gave up. As long as the door opened, he would immediately rush out and let Hua block Ling Han. With Hua's strength, it should not be difficult for him to block Ling Han for a few minutes, and if there was no one to block him, a few minutes would be enough for him to run very far. If this stone door was the end point, then he would definitely be able to obtain first place. Ling Han laughed heartily. You guys are looking down on me too much. He rushed out and attacked from the front. Hu came forward to meet him. He was clearly an incomparably clumsy stone man, but he actually gave Ling Han a feeling of lightness. This guy was truly extraordinary. But no matter how extraordinary he was, he would still be defeated by Hu. Ling Han mercilessly punched out. On the other side, Hong Tianbu, Hu Taifeng, Plum Blossom, and Wu Ledong all attacked together. They all had the same idea, and that was to wait for the door to be broken open, then they would take the opportunity to kill their way out. Ling Han would just let the others block him. However, their defensive energy had already been destroyed by Ling Han, and every punch was a real injury. Bang! Hu Taifeng was the first to withdraw from the battle. The damage to the stone man had already reached 100%. The reason why he was the first was because he had already steeled his heart to fight to the death with Ling Han. He wanted to send Princess Bai Xiao to the first place. Ling Han also paid a price for this, and his defensive energy had dropped to 50%. He continued to fight, and after a while, Plum Blossom could only helplessly withdraw, while Ling Han's defensive energy had dropped to 17%. When Wu Ledong also retreated from the battle, Ling Han's defensive energy had already fallen to rock bottom. He had already started to suffer substantial damage. Although there was only Hu and Hong Tianbu left now, the battle prowess of these two people was still extremely powerful. In terms of power, Ling Han only surpassed them by 1/3, unlike when he was facing Hu Taifeng and the others, who had a power advantage of almost 100%. Fight, fight, fight. Hu and Hong Tianbu both displayed astonishing battle prowess. However, it was still Ling Han who was stronger. After all, he had slaughtered his way out of the origin world, and his battle experience was something that Hu and the others couldn't compare to. Bang! At this time, the palace door had already been broken open by Princess Bai Xiao, and a huge dragon statue impressively appeared behind the door. Phone reading is more refreshing. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.